and welcome to Macros with Mythili, where we take a hard look at all the major macroeconomic issues and challenges before the country. One of the biggest issues today is the almost complete absence of social security for the vast majority of the population, except for a minuscule section of the population, essentially government employees and employees of some public sector undertakings who enjoy the benefit of pension, and employees in the formal sector, another approximately 6% really, who get the benefit of a provident fund under the EPFO Act. The rest of the population, a little over 90%, has virtually no social security. The NPS, or the new pension scheme introduced in 2004, was meant to address this lacuna, but has not lived up to its billing. To discuss what ails the NPS, how it can be improved, and other related issues, we have with us a panel of arguably the best brains on the NPS and pensions. Wwatch, whose name is almost synonymous with pension reform, thanks to his pioneering OASIS report. Kumar, CEO, Value Research, who has perhaps the best insights into retail investors' minds, and R.V. Verma, member, PFRDA, Pension Regulatory Development Fund Authority. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gautam, if I can start with you, because as I said, I think you have the closest connections with pension reforms in the country. You know, everybody talks about India as this young country, demographic dividend, etc. So is this kind of a tension that we're now focusing on the pension sector and the pension reforms? Is it misplaced? Are we kind of somehow getting excessively worried about something that is not really a big issue, given that we're such a young country?
Well, not really. I think the way I would look at this is that while the country at the level of demography we're still young, but I think if you look at the absolute numbers, the numbers are fairly frightening. We have about 100 million elderly already today, and this number is going to double in the next 10 to 15 years. So any country in the world which has to take care of 200 million elderly who might not have access to a retirement fund or a pension, I think would be outside the scope of let's say, the fiscal capability of most countries. For a country like India, it's a gigantic problem. The flip side also is that because we are a very young country and we still have another 900 million people who are young, I think this is an excellent time for us to start thinking much more actively about encouraging them to start saving for their old age, so that they don't, when they're old, they don't become destitute and are dependent on others.
The mutual fund industry also has retirement benefit products. So in what way is the mutual fund industry's record in the case of these kind of retirement fund schemes, how is it different from the NPS? What has been the experience of the mutual fund industry in this area?
No, I would say that there are two retirement benefit plans offered by mutual funds in the last 15 years. And I have no doubt in saying that they are fake retirement plans. They are not really retirement plans. Why do you say that? Because the way I look at a retirement product or a pension plan, so to say, where you accumulate your savings for a long period of time while you're working, and then you have a phase when you stop working, and then you start deriving income from that, and there is a mechanism which facilitates that. This is nothing. These funds are they have a 3-year lock-in period. They get you 80. They get you ATC benefit. And the asset allocation is mandated that it must have 60% into fixed income. So a long-term product which is completely deprived of equity, even the NPS, the most aggressive plan, can have 50% into equity. Of course, there are too many structural interventions, or our government has this nasty tendency of telling you everything in great detail what exactly has to be done.
No, the idea is to keep people's money safe.
Safety comes with a design. Safety comes with a time period. I would say that the stock market is considered or perceived to be the riskiest thing. And look at where the Sensex is. And if you are investing, it's a real funny situation that we have our long-term savings getting into fixed income, at the least in NPS to the tune of 50%. And in case of employee EPFO, it is entirely, the whole amount is in fixed income. And our short-term saving finds its way into equity. Look at anybody's experience we have limited history, but a 20-year holding period return or a 15-year holding period return on Sensex, for the statistics that we have available, is never less than twice as much as the fixed income available in this country. So I'm benchmarking it to the fixed income because we have widely available fixed income avenues. And the other alarming thing is that you will do all these pension products. We have devised all these pension products. People have this false notion that they are saving for their retirement, and these savings will not be able to beat inflation. we are one of the unusual country where we have the highest rate of inflation, and our fixed income, however apparently they might look that they are yielding high return, you are unable to beat inflation. So we will have a very unusual situation that everybody will save diligently for a lifetime to become poorer, because look at what EPFO is yielding you today. You know, they are actually very generous about their return of 8.75% or 8.5%, which is lower than what my inflation is today. So
yeah, but the argument about the stock market, I don't entirely buy it, because how you calculate your return in the stock market is also a function of when you enter and when you exit. So there have been phases when maybe you lost even your principal. So the EPFO, the advantage of the EPFO is that at least your principal is safe and you get a return, yes, which may be negative in real terms, but that has equally been true of all bank deposits. So in the case of a pension product, do you agree, Raj Vikas, that safety comes first, return is secondary, and that's what the NPS hopes to do by giving people an option that if I'm a conservative person, then maybe I would like to go for the, you know, the products which are more weighted in terms of fixed income. If I'm a more risky person, or my life cycle is such that I'm in the early stages. So was that NPS meant to kind of fulfill that lacuna? And if that is the case, why has it not proved to be more popular than it is?
Sure, that's a very good point actually, and I would like to at the outset, clarify, or my perception about the NPS is that it has different components, and these different components are meant for different segments of the population. Now we clearly know that there are certain segments of the population who are who have pretty much aware about the financials, the financial market, the capital market developments, and they are savvy people. There is a very large segment of the population which is, as you mentioned in the beginning, the unorganized sector, who have to be catered through a different kind of product altogether, for whom safety and stability is certainly more important. There is yet another section of the population who can be considered to be to have mixed appetite for risk, risk versus return. They can be a good mix, healthy mix of the two. So you have different segments of the population to really cater to. And when NPS, the way it has been designed, the whole architecture is meant to be premised on a very disaggregated sort of architecture and unbundled approach. So you are getting to have more number of players for each specific activity, and more number of players for each specific activity would essentially mean that you are developing a professional expertise for managing that particular component of the architecture, and that would lead to cost efficiency, more efficient pricing, and better service. So combination of all these is sort of incorporated in the NPS design overall.
But then why isn't it proving more popular? Because I was looking at the numbers, and less than 2% of the working population actually has gone in for an NPS account. That is including,
because it is mandated for the government employees.
No, but still less than 2%, which is, I think, mutual fund subscribers. How many would we have, Dhirendra?
No, mutual fund is no good. We will have no more than.
No, I'm talking generally about mutual funds. Would they be more popular than NPS?
Let me tell you, over the last 5 years, I think this somehow this bit of a misnomer. Over the last 5 years, from 2009 to 2014, the number of subscribers has gone up from 2 lakhs in 2009 to 72 lakhs. This is the beginning, and the journey is still far from complete. I think we are at the beginning of the journey itself, and it's a very nascent industry. So we are migrating from defined benefit to a defined contribution regime, and which is a paradigm shift. Okay. I mean, let me just clarify that. Okay. And that paradigm shift would take into account the change in the mindset of the people, the evolution in the financial and the capital market itself, the efficiency of the pension fund managers. So everything goes along with it. So once we have introduced this, PFMs, for example, we have made PFMs to be exclusively managing the pension funds only.
Okay.
No other activity.
So it's a whole new paradigm that we're talking about. But I'm afraid on that note, we have to slip into a very short break. But please do stay with us. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing the entire issue of pension sector reform. Gautam, if I could just come back to you once again, because Raj Vikas was talking about defined benefit, defined contribution, and in fact the entire move towards defined contribution has been driven essentially by fiscal considerations of governments everywhere. Now Chile was one of the first countries in the world to go in for this, saying that you need to have private pensions. But the Chilean government very soon went back to government chipping in. So is this entire belief that this, everybody should save for himself, is it an abdication of state responsibility? And can you tell us a little bit more of the entire concept with 3 tiers? Tier 1 where the government provides some minimum subsistence level, Tier 2 where the individual saves for himself, and the Tier 3 which is equivalent to the NPS Tier 2, where if I want to go on a trip to the Riviera, I have to pay for it myself, as it were. So what is it? In today's NPS, the government is nowhere in the picture except for government employees. So is that fair?
Well, I wouldn't agree. So I think if I look at the NPS today, what the NPS is doing is it's creating an enabling infrastructure using which almost anybody in the country can actually start saving for their old age in a very secure environment. I think another good thing that the NPS does is it doesn't sort of bind anybody into any one particular way of saving. So if there are people who don't want to take too much of risk, the NPS offers you a pure GSEC option. If you want to take up risk and you know about markets, for instance, you can create your own portfolio using the the equity or the corporate bonds or the GSECs products. So I think it gives you that. And more importantly, what the NPS does is for people who would end up getting penalized because of low financial literacy or knowledge, it has a very nice default, which is a life cycle fund. So I don't know how much of equities I should have. I am age 23. I just opt for the default, and the default then allocates my savings into equities, corporate debt, and GSECs in a particular way. And every year, my portfolio keeps getting rebalanced.
No, but you haven't answered my question, Kautup. But in that case, these options were available under the Chilean fund also. Why did the government feel the need to step in?
There were 2 things that went wrong in Chile, and I think the NPS actually learned from some of those examples. And when we did this study in about 15 years ago, what we realized was there were 2 things wrong. One was that the fees and charges in the Chilean system were extremely high. And those fees are essentially asset-based fees. So people who had started saving, as Dhirendra was saying, started reaching retirement where 40% or 50% of their savings had been paid off to fund managers or other market participants as fees and charges over those 30 years. This was one big problem. The second big problem was that the fund managers were almost like the mutual fund industry. So each fund manager knew exactly who their customers were. In the NPS, it's blind asset management. So I don't know who my customers are. I just focus on fund management. I don't do anything else. But there what started happening was the fund managers started spending a lot of money to steal customers from other fund managers. This further increased the cost.
But high cost, I think, Rajvikas, is a charge that is levied against the NPS also. That the charges are very high as compared to mutual funds. Maybe we can ask Dhirendra how you compare. But the general belief is that NPS charges are very high, and you could perhaps bring them down substantially, particularly for those, and this pinch is most for those who save relatively small quantities. Is that correct?
I wouldn't agree, really. The charges are based, for different kinds of services, and across the board you have different bidders for that. So we have a very transparent system of bidding and discovering the price actually. And today, for example, if we have the fees for the pension fund managers, which was based on the bidding process, and we have arrived at a clear switch from 0.25% earlier to 0.01%. Now we are trying it out, and I'm sure this will bring down the cost quite substantially for the ultimate subscribers, because it gets loaded onto, in terms of the NAV, onto the yield to the subscribers. So similarly, we have very efficient, maybe there could be scope for reducing the cost further. That's another thing which we are constantly looking at, and that could really result in cost saving and ultimately better yield on the investment. So there are different components. The short point is that we have these players who are competitively driven. What is constraining the whole business, or I would say the business model, is the scale of, say, AUM. Once we are focusing on that right now. Once we have large volumes coming in, today we have, say, for example, 62,000 crores, and which I think should go up to, we are targeting 1 lakh crores by the end of this fiscal year. But it should go up substantially once we have more corporates on board.
So let me ask Dhirendra whether volumes are an answer, because mutual funds, we've got huge volumes, and we've seen the performance of mutual fund industry has not been particularly great. So are volumes the answer, as Rajvikas seems to suggest? Number one, that is my first question. And my second question is the 401k debacle in the US. If these NPS was roughly patterned on the way of say 401ks. So in fact it is true that many people lost their entire savings in the 401k. So even in the case of the NPS, depending if you happen to retire at a time when the market is down in the dumps, and you were talking about the capital market being very good return, but you must remember the Nikkei is still not get back to where it was 20 years ago. So isn't the risk entirely that of the poor small man, as it were?
No, I would like to say that these are very deep set perceptions. When we refer to Nikkei as still not being able to attain its 20-year-old high, we are assuming that somebody got up in the morning 20 years ago and invested all his money, which he didn't. That's the whole point, that you are investing month after month out of your savings, and the government is matching it. And you, absolutely. Pension plan is, and that particular behavior that you get up on one fine morning to invest all your money in stock market to lose it all, pension is just an antidote to that. You are investing month after month, you are reducing the risk by your behavior, by your disciplined investing. And let me tell you that on a 7-year basis, we have done it based on a limited history of Sensex, which is very inefficient. By all means, I'm of the belief that Sensex is not reflection of the quality fund management, because Sensex is very flawed. Sensex on a 7-year regular savings basis gives you twice as much return from any point to any point. The problem is that people have not experienced the joy of equity ownership in a methodical way. And if you do that, your experience will be very different from what everybody thinks. In fact, NPS has been one of the most disappointing things, because look at it, how it was planned. The trade-off for this defined contribution was that you will, everybody getting into the central government from 1st April 2004 should be, 10% will be deducted from his salary, 10% matched by the government, and then it finds its way into a discretionary, portfolio which he chooses to. That was the initial architecture. And I don't think there was any problem in that. From 2004 to 2008, the kind of market that we saw, NPS did not take off for some reason or the other. The parliamentarians did not permit it, or whatever. It did not actually got going. All the money which was deducted found its way into Consolidated Fund of India for 4 years. That I think was one of, and the big bull run comes every once in a while, in a decade. So that was a missed opportunity. If we had, the number of people he is referring to, the central government employees, if 10 lakh people would have come into the market in that methodical fashion, I don't think today we'll be sitting here and discussing and building a case, because you will have real people experiencing,
So my question about volumes, larger volumes, mutual fund industry has much larger volumes than say the NPS today. So has that been an answer? Are large volumes an answer to good performance?
It's not about performance, because it is all about getting why equity does well, and why methodical investments, regular investing actually proves rewarding. Simply because you are able to eliminate the anxiety from your investment, having the long-term orientation, and that money finding its way into equity, mixing it, and having lower expense.
Okay, so
I have no doubt. I think
about
the NPS structure, I have no doubt that it's a beautifully planned architecture. You have these costs which are very, I would say very objectively built into it. It is a matter of scale. I think, where we have the Savalamban scheme, I think if the government would have simply funded all kind of NPS account opening expenses, that would have done a much bigger job than this, 1,000 rupee subsidy.
So maybe that's the answer. Well, I'm afraid on that note, we have to slip into a very short break once again, but please do stay with us. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing pension sector reform. Gautam, both Dhirendra as well as Rajiv Kas were talking about the benefits of investing, particularly in equity. Dhirendra particularly was very vocal about his support for that. Now, the EPFO, which is perhaps some kind of alternative that existed before NPS, they've been very reluctant to invest in the stock market. What are your views? Are they being excessively conservative, or are they being wise?
Well, I think they're just being very realistic. The Central Board of Trustees consists predominantly of trade union leaders, some HR heads from corporates, and some government officers. I don't think this group of 50 people are necessarily qualified to manage an equities portfolio. And I think the fact that they are staying away from equities is but natural. So secondly,
is it fear or lack of knowledge?
I think it's lack of knowledge, really. Or just it's really, to manage an equities
that
portfolio,
means that
you
they
need
have no business to
specialized
be there in the first
absolutely.
place.
No, so they could be
They should be
administered.
thrown out.
They
Labour
could be
Ministry.
well. They could be administrators of the fund without necessarily taking over the responsibility
Of
of
managing the
deciding what
funds,
the
okay.
portfolio should be, and more importantly, how to manage that portfolio. So second problem with I think with EPFO about equities is I would suggest they should not invest in equities, because there would be certain people in out of the 50, 70, 100 lakh EPFO clients who don't want equities, who want purely G-Secs. There could be some others who are now going to retire in 2-3 years. They also don't want equities. So what should ideally happen? If I was the EPFO, I would say, let me make friends with the PFRDA. They've got excellent products, including a nice life cycle product. They've got fund managers who are doing fund management at 1 basis points. I'm very happy to play a sort of a mandatory POP kind of a role, where I enforce contributions through employers and hand over the money to the PFRDA funds. And what this would do is this would free EPFO from doing all the mundane tasks of transferring accounts here and there, because this happens magically and automatically in a NPS environment.
But Devendra, I also wanted to ask you, one of the biggest problems with NPS really is that you don't get too many tax benefits. It is exempted, taxable at the end. So how significant really are tax benefits in inducing investment in any scheme? Whether the stock market, mutual funds, you get tax benefits, which you don't get under NPS. So can that be a driver?
That can be a huge driver. Of course, when you invest, you get the ATC benefit. In this recent budget, it has also been provided for the employer's contribution up to a certain entitlement being made a tax exempt. But yes, the terminal benefit not being taxable. If I invest in a balanced fund which invests 35% into fixed income, 70%, 65% into equity, that is the legal definition as per Income Tax Act defining equity. So even up to 35% of my fixed income allocation actually gets the treatment of a tax-free appreciation, and that is a huge break, because only agricultural income and investment appreciation on equity is tax-free. That makes it a completely different game.
So Raj Vikas, is there any chance at all, you think, how much of pressure can you possibly bring to bear on the government to make this also tax exempt? EPFO is tax exempt, in the case of mutual funds also. So this becomes a big deterrent. That's my first question.
I think the
second question is about annuity. Annuity market in India is ridiculous. Nobody in their right senses would want to buy an annuity, and there are virtually very few products. So these are two big issues. What can the PFRDA do about remedying this?
Yeah, of course. This first is the EEE status of the NPS, and we are very, very seized of the fact that it has there's non-level playing field, and that's one of the reasons why this scaling up is not happening. For the corporate sector to come in, and if we don't make the payouts as tax exempt, which is available in case of EPFO, etc., that doesn't make the scheme very, very attractive. So ultimately, the cost gets to be huge, and particularly for the people who have saved for a shorter period of time. Number two, and that's something which we are engaged with in the government, and government also is pretty much seized of it. So we are confident that sooner than later this exemption is going to come through. So we have taken up with the government a number of times, and we are very active in that. Number two is as far as annuity is concerned, I think we need to look at some kind of a regular cash flow to the beneficiary or to the subscriber, which is the main purpose of pension. So that can come in the form of annuity. Probably we may have to see how best we can make it affordable to the individual, and if look at the different segments of the population, as I said, that Swavalambhan population, for example, Swavalambhan subscribers, they need that kind of a nudge or the support from the government so that they are incentivized to save a little for their future cash flows. So if we purely understand that yes, annuity could turn out to be very small in case the accumulation is too small or the market may not be too vibrant, but we have to find a way to have people served but through a regular cash flow rather than everything monetized and given to them as one corpus, as one-time fund, which can be consumed or eaten up at no point of time. Number three, which I'd like to mention about the
because we're almost at the end of our time, yes,
unified pension regime. I mean, it's Gautam, it's very good of him to have mentioned about the total corpus, and there has to be a unified one pension regime, and where we can have some kind of integration between the EPFO and the PFRDA corpus under the NPS, and that will give both economy of scale to more efficient driving of the entire funds utilization. And three, which is most important, is financial sector reforms and its bearing on the pension sector.
Also more
So
parity.
if we have two different components which are determined by whose policy are driven by different ministries, I think we are not really getting anywhere. And they are sitting on so much funds. I think it will be very important to develop a more unified pension regime, and we should be truly reflective of the reforms in the financial sector and the fiscal sector.
So clearly we have a long way to go as far as pension reforms are concerned, but it's something that will not brook any delay, because time and tide, as you know, wait for no man, or for any woman for that matter. With that note, I'm afraid we come to the end of this program. Thank you so much, Gautam, Dhirendra and Rajvika, for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you also for watching. Thank you very much, but we'll be back next week, same time, with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.